Francesca Fiorentini had an appearance on the Piers Morgan show, Piers Morgan Uncensored, and she went head-to-head with right-wingers like Mr. Wonderful Kevin O'Leary, defense attorney Mark Garagos, and Michael Knowles from the Daily Wire, and of course Piers Morgan himself, who might as well be lumped into the right-winger category even though he's British. Francesca did an awesome job of taking these guys on and shooting their points down, and I wanted to share a few clips from Piers Morgan's show and give my thoughts here and there, so let's take a look at it.
I'm not sure they care. The fact that more than half of them think it's politically motivated is unsettling.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, will get finished off in the appellate system. But this is a remarkable time in American history and not that great for the American brand, as you started talking about at the beginning. This is more like a Venezuela kind of Cuba, Banana Republic story. You got the porn star. All this stuff is really not what G7 countries do to their leaders.
I completely agree. This is Francesca. I just don't get. We see you're laughing, but Mitt Romney, for Mitt Romney to come down so squarely on the side of Trump.
I do want to just say, look, so the crimes were falsifying business records. Now, the reason I didn't know that before is because I'm not a lawyer and I'm not the journalist who is anchoring this entire show, who should have told you that it was falsifying business records. Now, on the other
because
point,
those aren't felonies.
I hear you that most Americans don't care about falsifying business records. I agree with Kevin and I agree with Piers. However, I will say this. Most Americans also are very much go on gut. And they don't like that a candidate is now a convicted felon. But moreover, this candidate is someone who, and it is not the crime, however we know, cheated on his pregnant wife with a porn star in a hotel in Lake Tahoe and then bragged about it and then tried to pay her to shut up and also paid another Playboy bunny to also be quiet about their relationship.
Bill Clinton had sex with an intern
You're going back to Bill Clinton because it's the only thing you have.
Clockwork. Piers Morgan chimes in with Bill Clinton, reaching all the way back to the early 90s just for the sake of having a what about argument here. I personally don't see what the relevance is what's going on with Donald Trump, but I'm not surprised.
Well, it's not a bad thing to have.
No one's
unlike
talking
Trump,
about Bill
he was president at the time.
You know, I don't mean to pick on Francesca too much here, but it's very telling that even the liberals who are going on television to defend this ruling have to Google in the breaks to figure out what the crime was. and even then, I'm sorry to say, misrepresent what the actual supposed crime was. The reason here that this has to take... Well, excuse me one second, Francesca. I'll just finish my point real quickly.
Cooking the books. That's the same thing.
Yeah. It's not a felony, not a crime. But anyway, that's a point for another time. The reason why even the great defenders of this conviction can't... yes, to you as well. The reason that they can't articulate this is because it's not really a crime. That's why they had to upend 234 years of precedent for this. And it gets back to a point that you made earlier, Piers.
We have Michael Knowles being condescending here with the smirk and the smile during the back and forth with Francesca, and I always notice that when the MAGA right-wingers talk about Trump's crimes, the rulings from the jury, the unanimous rulings from the jury get swept under the rug. They pretend the crimes never took place, they're fake crimes. People like Michael Knowles legitimately put the blinders on to try to run defense for Trump. Without fail.
And that you made, Kevin, which is that Alvin Bragg really overplayed his hand. Sure, he overplayed his hand to some degree, but what else were they going to do? Donald Trump was always going to be the Republican nominee in 2024. A lot of people feel that he was gypped in 2020. He's the biggest guy in the party. It was going to happen. And Trump poses a real threat to the liberal establishment. He's not a Mitt Romney-type Republican. He has different views from the so-called uniparty on things like trade, on things like immigration, and things like foreign policy and war. Trump posed a major threat. That's why they took such extraordinary measures for the last 8 years to take this guy out. They weren't able to do it politically. They weren't even really able to do it at the ballot box. So what's left? The only thing left to do is to try to throw him in prison.
It's not surprising that Michael Knowles would say something like they didn't do it at the ballot box. We're still here pretending that Donald Trump didn't lose the election. And of course, Piers doesn't chime in and stop here and question Michael Knowles with something like, are you saying Joe Biden didn't win the election? The right-wing members on the panels of Piers Morgan show always get to spout their points unimpeded. The numbers are literally stacked against Francesca, and anyone can see that it's not a balanced panel.
So that he can't campaign for the election. I agree, it's backfiring.
This is not a federal case, Michael. You know that. It's not even a federal case. Why do you think that it's not a DOJ case? It's not a Biden case. It's not a Merrick Garland thing. It's New York state law. So the idea that this is somehow politically motivated is all made up in your head, because what you
Biden's
do
DOJ is
on
also
your show
prosecuting
every
Donald
day
Trump twice.
is you groom your audience and you set them up for a complete takeover of the DOJ. This is all about allowing Trump to get away with any crime he wants, as you sort of slighted and sort of, laid out very nonchalantly just a little bit ago. He was impeached twice. Doesn't really matter that he tried to blackmail the leader of Ukraine into digging up non-existent dirt on Joe Biden, but that doesn't matter to you
Joe
or
Biden
your
threatened
followers.
to withhold arms.
You want to make sure. You want to make sure that when
you're
Trump is
accusing me
reelected,
of fascism.
he can get away. He can get away with getting rid of the Department of Education.
Charge. All I would point out is that it's not my party that's imprisoning its political opponents.
Right.
Now. So if we're going to throw that accusation about it.
I was about to say.
Michael Knowles just talks over Francesca Fiorentini, and to no one's surprise, here comes Piers Morgan with the save with the, I was about to say it's really the Democrats who are fascists, not the far-right wingers. Certainly not the guy who tried to overthrow the election.
One of the key tenets of fascism is you imprison your political opponents. Let me come back to Mark Garagos. I want to play.
Okay, so I'll stop it here. We see time and time again on the Piers Morgan panels that there's typically a numbers game with right-wingers outnumbering the progressive, and Piers Morgan himself, who will swear that he's not a right-winger, but he constantly defends Donald Trump while taking his pot shots at Joe Biden and Kamala Harris or the progressive guest on the show, whether it be Francesca Fiorentini or Cenk Uygur or Brian Tyler Cohen. Francesca Fiorentini really tried to get her points across here, and she dropped truth bombs that they didn't want to hear. Donald Trump is the guy who would not accept the results of the election, and it's funny that with all the talk of a banana republic and fascism, we hear him say something like he wouldn't accept the results of the election this time around unless he won. And it doesn't raise red flags to these people at all. This is a guy who tried to overthrow the election, but Piers Morgan and Michael Knowles and the like are adamant that it's the Democrats who are fascists. If we are talking about the crimes of Donald Trump, he's been ripping off people his entire life. He's been defrauding people with his university, being unable to run businesses in New York City because he's defrauding people with his charity. But Michael Knowles and Piers Morgan cape for him, claiming that he's the one being persecuted. MAGA is living in an alternative reality, and stooges like Michael Knowles are championing it. What's really going on and what's really right in front of their faces doesn't matter to them. But how do you think Francesca Fiorentini did with the numbers stacked against her in this panel? Do you think she handled herself well, or do you think it was Michael Knowles and Piers Morgan who came out ahead? We see false equivalencies thrown in time and time again, and I always love seeing Francesca shut them down. The right-wing arguments just don't seem strong enough, so I figure Piers is always going to try and tip the scale by having more right-wing pundits on the panel. But don't let my little conspiracy theory sway you. Francesca could have pointed out that anyone, regardless of their political leanings, should be held accountable because no one is above the law, and she'd be 100% right. Anyway, I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next video.